This is week 4 of the winter trimester of 2018. So this week didn't go quite as planned. I went to school on Monday and half a day on Tuesday, but it turns out the cold that I had the previous week had turned into bronchitis. So I ended up just taking the rest of the week off and staying at home so I could rest. And the things that I did on Monday and Tuesday, I think I'm just going to have to redo what I did because I wasn't really focusing, or I don't know, I wasn't at full mental capacity either. I was not feeling well and pretty out of it, so I think I'm just gonna have to redo what I did this week. But anyways, so instead of going over what I've learned at my atelier, I'm gonna share some things that I look at that I find inspiration from. So on Pinterest, I found this cool pinner called Vera G, and she has a lot of great boards up there on painters. She has a whole lot of information and a whole lot of files of pictures, which are really cool to go through. So and what also is great is for artists like Waterhouse and Alma Tadema, she's found some of their paintings that are in progress, which is really cool to see, because then you can start, figuring out how those painters built up their paintings. And then also she has a huge folder, or not a folder, a board on Rembrandt, and she has a lot of detail shots of Rembrandt that is cool to see. You can really start to see the different quality of surface if you used thinner paint or thicker paint. So I recommend following this person and going through her boards because she has a lot of great images that she's found. Also, I love listening to art podcasts. So probably my favorite one is Suggested Donation, and this one's done by Tony Serenai and Edward Minoff. They're two painters in New York. I think they're from the Jacob Collins School, and they interview other painters that are like the realist and the naturalist painters, that most of them are painters from New York City, but they're starting to travel out a bit to get some other people. But their podcast is really nice because they it's more relaxed, and it's kind of like you're listening to these friends having a conversation at a bar talking about paintings or something like that. So it's really informal, and they've got good personalities too, so it's good. It's my favorite one. There's another one called Gently Does It by John Dalton, and he interviews a whole range of artists. Then his most recent ones have been more representational painters, but I think his earlier ones, it's just a very wide range. I think the Suggested Donation one is kind of under the more school of thought for I think most of them are classically trained from ateliers, not all of them I guess, but the Gently Does It podcast is just a wider range. And his style for doing the podcast, John Dalton, is a little bit more set up like an interview and more formal, so there's specific questions that he goes down. And then there's The Studio with Danny Grant, and his is set up a lot like Gently Does It, where it's a little bit more of a formal interview, so he goes down specific questions. And then there's the Sculptors Funeral. This one's really cool. It's art history podcast on sculpture, and it's really interesting. I love the guy that does it. It's very well done and very interesting. I don't know a lot about sculpture, but more and more when I'm thinking about compositions for my own paintings, I find a lot of the inspirations for how I want to pose figures is actually through sculpture. But like I said, I love podcasts and podcasts on painters. So if you know of any other podcasts, please put that down in the comments, because I'd like to find more if I can, because I listen to them a lot. So the ones that I have, I'm kind of running out of new episodes. And lastly, I wanted to remind you that there is a Kickstarter for the On Nerdrum documentary. I think they're over 50% funded now, and I think from this being posted, there should be 9 more days that it's open so that you can contribute. But I think this would be really cool to see a 6-episode documentary on Nerdrum, and it's on his inspiration. So it's always good to know how to paint, but I think a really other important thing is also learning what to paint. So that's the what to paint. I think is what this documentary is more diving into. So I'll put a link in the bottom for the Kickstarter if you want to support that, and then I'll have links for everything for all of the podcasts and the Pinterest board. And so I guess that's all for now. Next week I'll get back into my atelier progress.